All right, thanks for joining me, MC Laubscher. This is exciting. Our mutual friend Devin connected us, and you're doing a lot of cool things. So I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Same here, buddy. Same here. Great to connect, and we're looking forward to it.
Yeah. So I just wanted to jump in with something we're both into, the podcast. I know you do your podcast, the Cashflow Ninja. Yeah, just can you give me a little of the backstory of that? How'd you start that? And how's that been going?
It's been going great since I started Cashflow Ninja in 2016. So, but just to give you the backstory of how I came up with that show is I'm originally from South Africa. I came to the US and I played sports here up until 2007. And I started to, really read a lot of books on investing and economics and history and, the finance. I was very interested in that. So I was the guy on the team bus or the team plane that, I was reading books, right? Everybody else was playing card games. But what I then did was I came across a book, Robert Kiyosaki, his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that really opened my eyes to just another world of how to think about money, investing, wealth, assets, liabilities, that kind of stuff. And I bought my first investment property. Pretty much within 6 months after finishing that book. This was in 2001. And it was a single family property. I rented it out. I put some, tenants in there. I collected the rent. I paid all the bills. And at the end of the day, or the end of the month, rather, there's money left over. And I'm like, wow, it's like cash flow, just like in the book. It's amazing. And as I was playing sports, I was taking the money and then, building my real estate business. There was also, another event that happened where it's kind of like this month where three things kind of hit at the same time. I don't know if that's ever happened to you. But it's like this one specific month, I reread Robert Kiyosaki's book, and I read it every year, by the way, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's that core concept of and philosophy of when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Because throughout 25 years that I've read the same book, I see it different every year. It's almost like I'm reading a new book because I have a new context, a new paradigm. I've grown as a person, and now there's something else that I'm getting from it. So I also, think that sometimes you just have to read really good books many times instead of, getting into this, let's read 100 books this year. No, well, you can just read one book 100 times and probably get more from that. But anyway, in the book, I started to realize that a lot of things that were my liabilities were somebody else's asset. And that was, I think, one of the biggest kind of like aha moments I had in finance. Anyway, it really hit me that all of my liabilities were the assets of a bank, and that the banks have this whole game figured out. And if you look at the financial system, financial world, the banks, they got this down. They are not a participant in the game. They're the board. And I looked at that for my own life, and I'm like, wow, I got to become the board. I got to become my own banker. And then I had within that space of a month, a conversation with a friend of how he explained, he comes from a very wealthy family, of how they basically have built out their own banking system and how they've done it. And then I came across the book, Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash. Nelson Nash became a mentor of mine later. So that was a big one, which then led to, me starting my company, Producers Wealth, in 2015, where everything that I've done myself, the cash flow, the investing, the how to become your own banker, I was teaching everybody else how to do that, and clients in all 50 states in the United States. I was the guy doing this all online through Skype before Zoom, right? And in 2016, I had this idea to start Cashflow Ninja, the podcast, because I believe in lifelong learning, and that's where kind of the ninja comes from too. Cash flow, the investing ninja. My dad's like a martial artist, very famous one. Still travels almost 8 countries a year, and he always tries to pursue excellence in his craft daily. So I kind of brought that together, and basically the idea for the show was that I've had all these conversations with all of my clients. and they're in business doing many, many different things, or they're investors doing many, many different things. And I was like, I would talk to them for like an hour just about what they do, how they do it, and like the stuff that they're like, how they're able to do what they do in business, how they're able to do what they do in investments. And I was like, I gotta record this stuff and just share this with people. And because this is like mind blowing stuff, and not a lot of people know about this. They don't teach you this stuff in school.
Right.
And so then I just started recording it. We started to publish Cashflow Ninja podcast, and it's just about business and investing. And it got a lot of traction from a lot of people because, we're now been downloaded in 180 countries, over 8 million times, I think the last time I checked. And it's just because we just share stuff that people are actually doing. It's nothing. There's no theory involved. It's like, hey, what do you do? How do you make money? Like, how do you run your business? How do you grow and scale your business? Like, tell me about the marketing, the sales process, the operations. How do you manage the finance of your company? And then the same thing with investing, right? It's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it so much, having great conversations with people, and continue to do it.
Super cool. I love that name. I do martial arts too. Jiu-jitsu is my what I'm practicing these days, but I've bounced around a few of them. And what you're saying about reading the same book over and over again, it kind of reminds me of that Bruce Lee quote. I don't know word for word, but fear not the man who's mastered 10,000 punches. Fear the man who's mastered the one punch 10,000 times. It's
100%, 100. And also the thing about martial arts, and this is the beauty of it, and this is why I love it, and I feel blessed to have grown up in a house with it, is the attitude that you will never arrive like in excellence, or like you don't wake up the one day and you go, dude, I got this. I'm like Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris all in one right now. I'm good. I've never met a martial artist that thinks that way. People in martial arts are always like, okay, I got to get better. I got to get a little bit fitter. I got to get a little bit better. I look at some of these senseis that are like 8th, 9th Dan, 10th Dan, and they're like 80 years old, truly Mr. Miyagi's, and they just get up still every day, and they're like, they hone their craft, their art, because that's what it is. It's basically an art form, hence the martial arts that they're just trying to perfect, and they get up and just want to be better. They don't arrive there and go, I got this. And by the way, staying on that topic and that point, this is the biggest problem that I see in our world when it comes to knowledge. Because you go to school for, what's it now, 12 years? You go to college for 4, maybe there's a master's degree. And for a couple more years, MBA, law school, that kind of stuff. And then people go, yeah, I'm good. I've arrived at knowledge. I'm here. I know everything that I need to know. I'm smart, right? It's kind of insane. So if we all followed the martial arts approach, it'd be a completely different world.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It's an endless game, endless pursuit. There's chasing a moving target. Yeah. I want to jump into what you were saying about the cash flow. So you were mentioning how you kind of became your own bank. I'm curious, like, how do you view debt? Some people kind of call it leverage. Some people call it debt. So when you say that you operate like a bank, what does that mean exactly? And how do you think about debt? How do you use it or avoid it?
That's a great question. So debt is a tool. It's an instrument, and it could be extremely powerful, or it could be a weapon of mass destruction. I've seen people that have used debt very, very wisely and strategically, and that has really helped them. And I've also seen people use it the wrong way. That was their downfall. Now, the debt that I'm talking about too is in the context of wealth building, right? Because consumer debt completely different, than this investment wealth building debt. And what's the difference between the two? Well, if you buy a rental property and you have a mortgage on it, you took on debt from let's just say a bank or a mortgage company. But you can put people in that property. They can pay the mortgage and all the expenses and a little bit more. So at the end of the month, you're generating income from that property. So you've leveraged debt to create it, to first buy an asset that is generating income. And because of that, you get great tax benefits, which real estate has, and that property can appreciate in value over time. So that's an example of it being very, very powerful. But then on the other side is the consumer debt, the bad debt. Robert Kiyosaki in Rich Dad Poor Dad talks about good debt and bad debt. Good debt would be that example with the investment property. Bad debt is consumer debt. If you're just taking out your credit card and just spending money and racking up debt on stuff that is just serves no purpose others than making you feel good about yourself, that can be very, very destructive. So good debt puts money and cash flow into your pocket. Bad debt is just destructive debt. Now, when it comes to investment debt, my philosophy too is there's a time and a place for all of this. And this ties into economic and market cycles. And I mean, that's an hour conversation in itself, but just to break that down, in an economy and in markets, it's all cyclical. Markets go up. You can have a booming market, a growing market, and there's a lot of activity. And then the market becomes over leveraged, oversaturated. It corrects, and then sometimes it crashes. If it overshoots in exuberance, if it's a little frothy, it's going to crash harder. And it all depends where you are at in an economic cycle and a market cycle of how to strategically use debt for investment purposes. So I'll give you an example. So in 2008, 2009, we had a massive real estate crash. And we also had this great financial crisis. Everybody talks about it now. It's like the GFC. It was terrible. I lived through that. I was an investor through that. So what happened was you had this huge boom after the dot-com bubble crash all the way up to 2008, 2009. And then the whole housing market crashed, and then which then led into the whole financial system basically crashing. Now, if you were over leveraged in debt in 2008, 2009, you could have gotten wiped out. And a lot of people did. So, but if you then started to leverage debt again in 2012 when the market kind of bottomed and went all in and borrowed as much money as you can and bought up as much real estate as you could, you would have multiplied your wealth incredibly from 2012 to 2020, 2021, 2022. And again, in 2022, when interest rates started going up, a lot of people got caught with debt. So that was another good example of deleveraging from all of the debt. So taking on less debt, paying off debt. I mean, there's a time and a place for everything. So it's like a sliding scale, right? Where if markets are bottomed and everything is cheap, you can take on as much debt as possible and buy up properties because you're at the bottom of the market. A lot less risk. When the markets go up and it's at all-time highs, it's the time to be cautious and not to take on debt. So becoming your own banker is all about how to create your own banking system where you become the lender and the borrower in that system. And you could set up a cash flow management system using life insurance contracts to become your own banker, where you then borrow from your own banking system the money that you need to go and buy, properties, to invest in other properties, to start businesses, to fund your own business, to grow your business, to buy automobiles, all the stuff that you would need. So that's the big concept. But debt can be good or bad. It's a tool. But if used irresponsibly, it can destroy people and families.
How does that work exactly? The life insurance contracts, how do you use you're talking about using life insurance contracts for real estate investments. Is that, yeah?
That's correct. Yeah.
How does that work logistically?
Yeah. So this will blow people's minds.
Yeah, I've never heard it.
Oh, it just completely like it's the first time I heard this, I fell off my chair. I couldn't believe it. There is a strategy which the ultra affluent, the ultra wealthy use in this country, in the United States. And this is pretty well known in the ultra affluent and ultra wealthy circles. Family offices, which are like multimillionaires, those families, they use this exact strategy. This, by the way, is how I discovered it. So first I read Robert Kiyosaki's book, said, I got to be the bank. The bank's the board. It's not just a participant. The second thing is I had that conversation with that friend of mine. He came from an ultra affluent family. And I went to lunch with him and his advisors. And I sat down and he had his CPA, his lawyer, and his life insurance person there. And I was just blown away. I didn't understand. I understood the tax guy and the lawyer there, but I didn't really understand what this life insurance guy was doing there. So afterwards I said to him, can you please explain this to me? Because I'm like, I don't get this. And he said to me, look, most people think of life insurance as like somebody has to die in order for someone else to benefit. And that's how the majority of the public buys life insurance. That's all they know. It's like you buy insurance so that if you die, your family gets, some money, right? Gets a payment. But how the ultra wealthy and the ultra affluent use it is it's structured actually as a vehicle to put money in. And you put money into life insurance, and it's a very specifically designed life insurance policy where 80% of the money that you put in there all goes towards the savings, the cash value of the policy. And the reason that you would do that is that the money is guaranteed in there. It's guaranteed to grow by the contract. Tax-free. You also get dividends because you structure it with a very specific insurance company called a mutual life insurance company. So you get to participate in the profitability of the company through the dividends. And then it does have a death benefit, but at any given point in time when you need access to money, you have guaranteed access to your cash value through a loan. You don't touch it. So what happens there? Why would you take a loan and not just take it from the policy? Well, because if you place, let's just say you have $100,000 in that policy and you place that $100,000 as collateral for a loan that you would get at like 5%. You never touch the money in the policy. You place that as collateral. So the money in the policy just keeps growing tax-free, uninterrupted, compounding, tax-free. And then you get to use that money to start a business, grow your business, and or buy real estate. And what the ultra wealthy and ultra affluent do is that they look at, this as a bank. So they have these life insurance policies in a trust. The trust is the bank to, let's just say, the person's business. So if that, using that example, let's just say the business needed $100,000 to incorporate AI or hire an employee or, just for a marketing campaign. The family trust would loan the business that $100,000 at 10%, let's just say. The business would take the money and pay back, at first make money from it, but then pay back that $100,000 plus the 10%, just like they would pay back a bank. But you, the family trust then, number one, make the spread 5%, so $5,000 in this case, profit as the family bank, and the money inside of the policy was never touched, so it just continues to grow with uninterrupted compounding. So he was sharing with me afterwards, he goes, look, MC, we have operating businesses, which generates a lot of money. We put it all in life insurance, and then we do this banking strategy and we buy real estate with it. And we do it over and over and over and over. And I was just completely blown away. And that's when the third piece was Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, sharing this exact same strategy. But you can build this banking system. And the reason why these wealthiest families do it is, just think about it this way: uninterrupted compounding, tax-free. And when you eventually pass away and die, the money goes tax-free through a death benefit to your children. And then they just do the same thing. And then it goes to the grandchildren. So this is kind of the Rockefeller method that everybody talks about, is they warehouse their cash in these life insurance contracts so that every single generation, contractually, their wealth multiplies tax-free. And in the meantime, you free yourself from banks and from, all these other financial institutions. Because if you're listening to this and you're like a business owner, or just an investor, like a real estate person, like you would cringe when just thinking of going into a bank. Like it's a proctology exam with a blood draw, right? It's terrible. So you kind of like cut out all of that, and then you have your own banking system. So like I said in the beginning, bankers are not just participants in the game; they're the board. This is how you build your own board. I'll just share this too. You don't have to be a Rockefeller to do what the Rockefellers do. You could do this on a smaller scale, and I will guarantee you it's going to have a massive change in the trajectory of your wealth. Why? Because I've experienced it firsthand. I've been doing this for 15 years myself personally.
That's crazy. So what is the barrier to entry? Why is it this kind of like the strategy of the affluent? What about, like, is it a high barrier to entry where you said other people can do it, but is it just a knowledge thing? Is it just an awareness thing?
That is the barrier to entry: knowledge and awareness. You have different levels of knowledge at different levels of society. So when you look at the ladder of society, which, there's a hierarchy in every single society. It doesn't matter where you are. I mean, if you want to break it down philosophically, we're all animals. We're animals. I'm from Africa. So when people start with all of this equality stuff, I said, look, it's very tough to sell that to a guy coming from Africa, because all I have to do is walk outside of my door and I see that the lion hunts the gazelles, and, there's a food chain, And within the pride of lions, there's a hierarchy, right? You have your big alpha male that is the protector of that pride and the leader of that pride. And then you have your younger kind of like lions that are there's a pecking order for them. So there's a hierarchy inside of all of that. There's a hierarchy inside of nature. We just can't get away from it. And in society, regardless of how you want to organize yourself and structure it, it is just nature, human nature, that this is eventually that we're going to be organized in different kind of like, there's a ladder with different like tiers, right? And I feel like one of my passions is to share as much of this knowledge, because there's a huge knowledge gap all the way down. Back on the life insurance topic, and it's funny, I say this because this actually repels a lot of people because of the knowledge gap. Who likes insurance in general? I can't stand insurance personally. Think about auto insurance. You pay premiums for your auto insurance, hope that you never ever use it. And when you do get into, like, let's just say a fender bender or a car accident, your premiums go up, and you're like, but I paid insurance to basically, have some money when this does happen. And when it does happen, it's hard to get the money. Number two, and number three, they put up your premiums. So life insurance is a very bad taste, and people have very emotional responses. And then you have a lot of influencers that speaks to the general public, like Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, all these people. And by the way, a lot of the stuff that they say about life insurance is true. 99% of the stuff that Dave Ramsey, for example, say, I agree with them because of how it's sold at retail level to the general public. But then there's a different world where these policies are some of the most powerful things that you could do financially for yourself. And it's one of the things that you should do, not the only thing. The barrier to entry, you could start setting these things up, if you have saving $20,000 to $30,000 a year, you could start setting up these policies to structure it just like the ultra wealthy does. You go through the list of people. We've shared so many stories of, the previous president, President Joe Biden. He had 6 of these policies, by the way. And it's all private. You wouldn't know it, but because he's the president of the United States, so he has to disclose that. So he actually legally disclosed that. And then there's a whole list of other stories, from Ray Kroc to Walt Disney to all of these families that have used and tapped in to these life insurance policies to fund their businesses and their business ventures. So no, it's a different world that exists. And to your point, it's a knowledge gap. It's just people don't know what they don't know. And the things that they've been told buy a lot of vehicles are just not true, or it was targeted at the general population.
And so if you're trying to close that gap, you're trying to gain awareness on how to leverage these systems. What distinctions do you look for between like the type of life insurance that someone like Dave Ramsey would warn against, and then these types that you can use as a bank and start to grow your wealth? How do you, if you're looking at a policy, what are some of the characteristics that would differentiate?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Number one, it has to be structured with a mutual life insurance carrier. So you have two types of carriers. You have a mutual life insurance company and a stock life insurance company. Stock life insurance companies are listed on the stock exchange, and their owners and their shareholders are stockholders, right? So their interest is to maximize profits for the people that buy their stock. And they want to make big announcements, hey, we had X amount of return, so that people, this quarter, so that people buy their stock. So that's who they're geared towards, and that's where their interests are aligned. Mutual life insurance carriers are owned actually by the policyholders. So they've been around since the mid 1800s. Some of these mutual life insurance companies, they're 170 years old. And all that they have to do is they have to make financial decisions that are in the best interest of the people that own their policies. Because if they do that, more people would want to buy policies from them. So that's all, their interest is kind of aligned. The other thing is the policy has to be structured a very specific way where 70 to 80% of the premiums that's put in go straight towards the cash value of the policy. Meaning, just simple math. If you put $10,000 into a policy, you have to have at least $7,000 or $8,000 available in that policy within 30 days. Where most of the ones that Dave Ramsey talks about, you would have zero. You wouldn't have any cash value available because it's more about the death benefit, right? It's that whole thing about somebody has to die in order for someone else to benefit. So there's no cash value in those policies. So when Dave Ramsey says these vehicles are a terrible place to put your money, it's right. It is, because it's just it's an expensive life insurance policy. When Dave Ramsey says that the agents just sell and makes big commissions, he's right, because of the way that they're structured actually increases the commission of the insurance agents selling them. As opposed to the other ones. So those are some of the things that you got to look for. It's got to be structured with the right carrier. It's got to be structured correctly, and then you have to have a financial professional that's kind of like a mentor and a coach. And I say that because it is a process, this whole thing. It's a system. It's not a product, which is how most of these things are sold. So you have to know how to take a policy loan, how to deploy it, how to pay it back, how to get the most out of that policy, and how to get the most out of the system. So, yeah, those are some of the things that I can share, but it's just one of the things that people should be doing, and it's a savings vehicle. So you should save and you should invest. This is one of the areas where you can save.
And then one last question on this subject. So you invest your money, and you said 70 to 80% goes towards the cash value. What happens to the other 20 or 30%? Where does that go to fees? Does that go to the death benefit?
Benefit, yeah. So okay. You're buying your death benefit up front. And then, using that example, in 10 years, you would have put in, let's just say $100,000, but you have more than $100,000 now in the policy, tax free. That's grown
because it's grown with it.
Yeah. But you do, in financial services too, there's no deals. It's all math. So with life insurance, you buy the death benefit of the policy up front. So that you can, so that the policy can hold the cash value growth in the policy eventually, right? So you're paying that up front versus the assets under management. AUM is kind of what people use the acronym, but what that is like a financial advisor would take, money, let's just say $100,000 and manage that, but they charge you 1% to 2% over, 20, 30, 40 years. So if you look at the studies that Vanguard has done, you could spend up to 2/3 of your gains just in that model, just paying fees. So that's the other thing. I'd prefer to pay it up front. get it out of the way, and then have my money grown at that stage, uninterrupted, compounding, tax free.
That's cool. One of my friends worked for a family office, and I knew there was some logistics, but I didn't really know how it worked. So it's super interesting.
Family offices are fascinating. I mean, it's not just because people think about the investments and the money and the wealth that's there, but it's just fascinating to see what goes inside of those family offices, how the focus is a lot on the just the things that are not the things that are the hard stuff, the family stuff, family bonding, like legacy assets of the core values of the family, the vision, what the family stands for, family stands against, the family statement of purpose, which is like their Declaration of Independence, the family constitution, a legacy library of like blogs, podcasts, videos, that kind of stuff. A family crest that the family can create themselves. And then also family masterminds to make sure, everybody gets together at least once a year. They're on the same page. They share best practices. They enjoy each other's company, and they grow these relationships. The money part, which is kind of like the legal, the tax, and the insurance frameworks, the family bank, and the asset management. It's almost the easier part. It's the humans that are involved in keeping them all on the same page, because here's another difference between the really affluent and ultra wealthy people and the average person. Those ultra affluent people know who the assets are in that family. It's actually the family members and the family itself, because they know if you invest in the family, and by definition doing that also in the individual family members, and grow them, the family itself will be bonded and stay together, and the individual family members will eventually then grow the financial assets of the family, just because you've invested so much time in growing the people, right? So it's the same thing in business, where if you want to grow the business, grow the people, grow your team, and the business then, as a result of that, will grow. Where we always just look at, well, how do we make more money or grow the money, or how do we grow the business and grow and scale the business? It's like, well, it's people, right? I know AI is a thing and the Terminator is coming, but it's still the people that are the assets.
If you don't mind me asking, what's your background in terms of family affluence? What was your upbringing like? And the reason I'm asking is Rich Dad Poor Dad is, and I love that book too. I've gone through it a couple times, and it kind of separates the affluent mindset from the non-affluent mindset. And this example with the family offices, life insurance policies, that's kind of getting at that. So what background did you come from? And then were you building off of an affluent background, or did you kind of transition into an affluent mindset when you read Rich Dad Poor Dad and started going down these paths?
Great question. No, I grew up middle class, and I grew up with a lot of scarcity, a lot of fear, just like everybody else does. This has been a self-development project of 30 years that I'm going on to, and again, I'm an immigrant in the United States. So I have an immigrant mindset too that I have to fight from time to time, which also is like scarcity and fear and, starting with, nothing. So no, I did not, come from an affluent family or these family office families. I did go to school with some of them, but I didn't really realize what that was about back then. I started to come across this as my mindset was shifting and changing, and that first step was Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And then that just took me in a completely different direction, where I started to see this world. And then eventually, building my businesses, and through my relationships, I built very, very good friendships with families in this space, with advisors. I still have a ton of friends that are advisors in family offices. And it's been one of the things that I have studied for the past 5 years more than anything else. And there's a recent report that just came out by Ernst & Young that just stated that the private family wealth, if you're listening to this, sit down, because if you stand up, you might fall over. Private family wealth in the world right now, and also in the United States, is larger than private equity and venture capital combined.
Wow.
So, I mean, obviously, there was a huge, massive difference just in wealth inequality before 2020. I think what started to happen after that is went into overdrive. It just went, I mean, it just was like, it just went onto steroids. But over the past 5 years, I mean, yeah, the amount of like new family offices that have been started up in the past 5 years, it's insane. But yeah, so people, I know a lot of people in my world too, they're like, oh, private equity, this is amazing. Like they're studying that, or venture capital, that's cool, you know, Shark Tank kind of stuff. It's family office wealth is the one thing that I've been studying, because it's like this space is not getting smaller. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger every year. And there's a lot of wealth concentrated there. So how do you protect it? How do you grow it? How do you transfer it effectively and efficiently to the next generation? Those are money problems that those families have, right? So as an entrepreneur and a business owner too, you're like, okay, well, what type of money problems do I want to solve? There's a lot of them. Everybody's got one. Anybody listening to this is a money problem. So which type of problems are you passionate and interested in solving? So that's definitely been, you know, a core focus of mine.
So someone who doesn't have a ton of money, they're in a scarcity mindset. It's one thing to read Rich Dad Poor Dad, to learn, to gain knowledge on the abundance mindset and the strategies associated with that. When you kind of started making that shift, when did you start to like feel it? You know, it's one thing to know and have the knowledge. It's another to feel it and kind of have that perpetuate through your decision making. So was it when results started coming in? Was it when you started to fully understand how these dynamics work? When did you shift from just having these ideas in your head to having it in your gut?
You know, here's the truth about this. I've been asked a lot of this, the similar question, but and nobody will admit this. I will. Every day I have to fight it still. It's so I don't get up in the morning and go, oh, well, there's just abundance everywhere. It's great. Like the personal development stuff is like the whole world is great. And like, listen, I love it. I'm all in. But I still fight it on a day-to-day basis. I get up and I still we're all wired a certain way. And I also think like humans are wired in a way to first wake up in the morning and scan for danger and try to figure out where the danger is, and then having strategies to minimize that, and then basically go and maximize their day. I think we're wired that way. I mean, the first thing is when you wake up is that you're alive and you don't want to get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger or the lion that's out there. And the second thing is, okay, now I can navigate. There's no threats or dangers out there, scanning, and now you can go about your day, right? I still feel like I operate the same way. So I fight it on a daily basis, and I get up, like, and I just go through, you know, scanning why am I feeling this way? What are the dangers? What are the threats? And then what are the opportunities because of that? And then it kind of changes my mindset into this more of abundant thinking. But I wouldn't say I wake up every morning and I go, you know, great, it's abundant. It's amazing. Everything's going to be fantastic. It's a mindset shift that I need to intentionally focus on daily. So when you're starting out too, just start where you're at. Recognize that, you know, yeah, I mean, you gotta develop yourself. You gotta grow, add skills, add and also add relationships to keep growing and keep building. But look at where you're at, what you're grateful for, and sometimes what you're grateful for, more of those things will come into your life too. But I would say, yeah, it's not a quick fix. It's a daily thing for me. It's not, and it's going to be, you know, I also think that it's a daily thing for a lot of people too. I mean, I would say, and I love Tony Robbins, I would say even Tony Robbins has his moments. There's no way Tony doesn't. So, and he has to just, fix his mindset too. probably on a daily basis too. Not a lot of people will say this, but like I said, I will say this. I think it's a daily thing that you have to do.
Yeah, we mentioned before we started recording, but I'm a trainer, and it's pretty similar, I think, with going to the gym. It's hard if you've never been a gym person, or if it's been a while since you've had a consistent gym routine, workout routine. It's hard to get in, but I've been doing it consistently for a while, and still every single day I have to convince myself that I know my goals, I know those steps to get there, but it does get a little easier once you have the momentum. I imagine that the momentum carries over in this area as well.
That's perfectly said. I mean, you couldn't have said it better. It's the exact same thing. You know what you have to do. You know what you need to go out and do. You got to continue motivate yourself. But when you're in a routine and you have momentum, and just using that example of working out, I mean, I've really spent a lot of effort and energy on my physical health this year too. And it's like when you get rolling and you're in it momentum, does it get easier? Yes, but you still get up and you're like, oh, do I really want to work out right now and go through this? And then you're like, yes, I have to, because this is my goal. This is my target. And then you start working out and you're like, oh, this is great. Why did I even think of not working out today? Right. So it's the same thing with mindset and with the wealth mindset for me.
Yeah. There's the idea of decision fatigue where you have to overcome a certain amount of resistance. But the way I think about it is the relative fatigue gets lower the deeper you get into the routine, the more momentum you've built up.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about your book, and I noticed I looked it up on Amazon. Tomorrow is the 1 year anniversary of it. I don't know if you realize that, but happy book anniversary there. It's
Thank you.
The 21 Most Unique Cashflow Niches. It's an intriguing title. Yeah. So what's the thesis of the book?
Yeah, so I released a book series, and this is on Cashflow Ninja. So we did the 21 best cashflow niches. We did the 21 most unique cashflow niches. Then we did the 21 best cash growth niches, and then the 21 next level cashflow niches. And basically what it is, it's a book series where we share all of these different investment and business strategies that people have shared on the show for what is now almost 10 years. It's been incredible. I mean, we have shared everything from how to invest in fine Scottish whiskey all the way to buying islands, how you can buy your own island, which is kind of crazy. I have a friend in Canada. They just did that, him and his two buddies. And it wasn't like the immediate thing that you're thinking, and I know you're doing this if you're listening to the show, is like, oh man, how many millions of dollars? It wasn't even millions of dollars. It was a couple of $100,000 that they were able to buy an island of, I think it's like 5 or 6 acres in Canada. Like it's pretty cool. But anyway, there's been some extremely interesting conversations that I have and ideas shared. So in that book series, we just we put it all together, and we just recently released another book to Get Wealthy for Sure, the #1 financial strategy for business owners to multiply wealth predictably, which that one actually became an Amazon bestseller, which I was very, very happy about. But in that one too, we talk more about the whole how to create your own banking system as a business owner. So if people want to just learn more about that, if they were intrigued by our conversation of that life insurance strategy, they could definitely learn more there too.
Yeah, awesome. And I'll include links in the description everywhere this is posted for all that. When these days, when you're investing, is it primarily real estate? That's how you mentioned you got started. Or do you invest in businesses and angel investing, that type of stuff as well?
Yeah, great question. So, we have invested in a lot of real estate, historic resorts, oil and gas. There's a whole bunch of different investments. But these days, my biggest investment has been my business for the past 3 years. So we've just been building up a lot of cash and investing in businesses. And if you look at, and again, one of the things that I've done successfully, I've made so many mistakes. Everybody that tries to do something big will make a lot of mistakes, and you will fail more than what you succeed. But the one thing that I actually did that has helped me a lot is just copy what the best players in the game's doing. So when you look at what the Warren Buffetts are doing right now, and a lot of the big players, they are building up as much cash as they possibly can, because they know how market cycles work. They know how our economic cycles work. So things just don't go straight up. It just doesn't happen. Things go up, markets go up, down, and sideways, whether it's a stock market, whether it's a crypto market, whether it's a real estate market. So I've just been building up a lot of cash, and then also investing in our own business.
So you've mentioned you made some mistakes, and that comes with the territory. How do you think about risk when you make an investment? What's your risk tolerance, and how do you what kind of stops do you put in place to make sure that the whole house doesn't come down if you do make a mistake, if something doesn't go perfectly?
Yeah, the biggest risk is in the investor. So that's kind of like, so I would never invest in something that I don't know about, don't understand the strategies, don't understand the team, who's part of the team, the management, and eventually, like, what does the outcome need to be in the exit? And then, I mean, from a risk standpoint, you have to be aware of political risk. That's a huge risk that nobody talks about, right? You could buy a great piece of real estate in a country, and then all of a sudden, there's a government that all of a sudden just, start confiscating land, which is starting to happen in South Africa, and that's making the news headlines these days. So political risk is huge. Then you have economic risk, like what's going on in the economy. Then you have market risk, what's going on in the market inside of the economy, like the real estate market inside the United States. It's tied to the economy, jobs. And then also institution, who's your money with? Who did you invest with? Like, in 2008, 2009, you could have shorted the stock market, but your money was with Lehman Brothers. Then you went bankrupt. You lost everything. Even though you were right. And there were people that did that, by the way. So because nobody thinks about institutional risk. It's like, well, what bank is your money in? Nobody thought about that, when Silicon Valley Bank went under. So that's very important. But, right at the, I would say the first thing is the risk of the investor itself. So for me, I'm pretty, I love my business. I have a lot of control there. I don't see it as risky at all. And then also certain types of real estate investments, because I've been a real estate investor for 25 years. So I know and understand it. I know what a bad deal looks like. I know what a good deal looks like. So that's what I would encourage people is, to become knowledgeable in an area. You can't be in all types of areas, but in one area, and then invest accordingly.
I try not to get too political on these conversations, mostly because I'm ignorant. But I did want to ask about the political risk in the U.S. Nowadays. The sense, and again, this is coming from a relatively ignorant perspective, but the sense that I've been gaining, especially with the new administration, and it seems like people are unhappy with just the general dynamics. They feel that the top 1% has a lot of power. I thought the response to Luigi killing the healthcare guy, that people are supportive of that, which is pretty objectively just a bad thing, murder. But you can tell people are frustrated with the healthcare system. You mentioned Joe Biden had 6 of these insurance, life insurance policies. So the top are using these policies, and the bottom, it seems, are getting increasingly that there's increasing unrest. Do you see any political risk with these family office type investments, these life insurance policies as banks?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, the one thing about elections that I've learned in my life is that after every single election, half of the country is going to be upset. Yeah. It doesn't matter which side. So, the whole thing I would say the reason why there's such wealth inequality too is the knowledge gap. And I don't think any administration or any country is going to fix that. So, that's why we're so passionate about education and educating people, because if we put out education and the knowledge out there, that could help people, because that is why you have two ends of the spectrum. You have, I'll give you a quick example. During during COVID, they had all these programs, PPP loans, all this money, people would send checks, that kind of stuff, right? Well, where did that all end up? It all went back to the top, to corporations and to banks and to the stock market. So how did people's lot change that even though they got money from the government, basically it all just went back to the top? So it's a knowledge gap. If you give every single person in the world $100,000, within 5 years, you're going to have the exact same setup it is now, just because there's a knowledge gap. One person's just going to spend it and blow the money as quickly as possible. The other person's going to start a business right away that people spend their money with, and they're going to get more of their money. And before you know it, in 5 to 10 years, you have the exact same structure again. So I think that's the big part of it is, the knowledge gap. And once you can't fix, you got to go from the bottom up and fix that. So, and it's not, you don't have a political solution. The solution is a ground up, bottom up approach where people gain the knowledge and start making better decisions and empowering themselves that way. And I think that's how you fix that. You're not going to fix it by, like taxes. Oh, let's raise the taxes. You're not going to fix it that way, because there's a tax code and that encourages certain behavior. So if the tax code changes, the top tier level of in the world, these family offices will just adjust and do the things that they need to do not to pay taxes in the new tax code, where everybody else is just going to continue to do what they do and pay more in taxes. So you're not going to solve it that way too. You're just going to solve it with knowledge.
I think you alluded to it. Do you have kids?
Yes, I do.
Yes. When you're raising your kids, how do you raise them so that as they grow older, they have these, that they understand how to use their money, how to have this affluent abundance mindset? What strategies do you use there? Games
and teaching them about money. They're still very young. But my daughter was 5 years old, and she started crying when we played Monopoly because she said, "Dad, I don't want to pay taxes. This is not fair." And I'm like, well, okay, then you need to make better decisions on the board. And I was showing her that if you do this and you do that, then you don't eventually pay those taxes. So anyway, you could use those kinds of things. Games, make it fun. Like my son asked me, "Dad, how do you make money?" And I said, "Well, you solve other people's problems." And he immediately said to me, "What problems do you have right now that I can help with?" Because he's thinking if he can help me, I will pay him some money. So, yeah, I mean, kids get it right away. It's just, and they're very young too now. So the older your kids are, the more they're going to be open to playing Monopoly games, playing Cashflow board games, reading books. The Tuttle Twins by Connor Boyack. He's got a ton of great stuff on education, on, how money works, how lemonade stands work, all that kind of stuff. You have to be intentional about this, because they're not going to teach them anything in school. They're going to teach them how to slit open a frog and look at the insides of a frog, but they're not going to teach them about what's the difference between an asset and a liability. So that's going to have to come. And again, bottom up approach. Fix yourself, fix your own house before you start. And then when your own house is in order, then you try and change help your neighbor, and then you help your community, and then it kind of ripples from there. I think, when people try to change the world without fixing themselves in their own house first, it's not a viable solution.
Gotcha. And I know you're a busy man. You probably have places to go. So I'll just ask one more question. Let's say just an average person, you've got a little bit of money in the bank, a little bit of cash, some debts, some credit card debts or student loans, stuff like that. What are some specific steps that you can take to start to build that affluent life around you? What is it? Pay off the debts first? Is it find a life insurance broker to help coach you through growing that family office type system, what would you suggest as pragmatic steps, or how much money do you need to start getting into these different levels?
Richest man in Babylon starts out with paying yourself first. That's where I would start. Try to structure and set up a financial kind of like system for yourself. So I would have 3 different areas. I would pay myself first, the 10%. I would put that in a bucket, and that's savings. The next 10, I would put in an investment bucket, and I wouldn't invest in anything until I first invest in my education and learn stuff. And then the next 10 is tithing. So that way, before you know it, you're starting to put 30% away. So if you could put 30% away of all of your income and your money consistently for like 2 years, now you're in a position to start actually doing stuff because you've built up muscle, you're disciplined, right? It's the same way with working out. Where, are you going to lift heavy weights, or you're going to start with smaller and lighter weights and eventually do that? Once you have that discipline and that system built out, then you start looking at other stuff. Like then you could set up, a banking system for the savings, which you now comfortably are putting away 10% in savings. Then you can eventually, 2 years down, buy, let's just say, your first investment property because you've studied real estate, you know the market, you understand how it works, you know the ins, the outs, everything. You know what a good deal looks like, a bad deal. And of course, then, the charitable part of it, the tithing, is like supporting causes. Once you give that, everything just comes back into your life, right? The energy that you deploy into causes that you're passionate about, that's going to come back to you in other different ways. So that's where I would start. That's how you start building, is one step at a time, discipline, put away, start with that 10% savings bucket, eventually push it all the way to 30. If you could save 30% of your income for 2 years, you're going to be very, very well, positioned to do really well financially in your life.
I love it. Well, MC, this was really cool. I know I'm going to go back and watch some of these to make sure I have all the details down. For anyone watching who wants to find you, what resources do you have out there that you'd recommend? And I'll include all links in the descriptions.
Awesome. For people that are interested in the Get Wealthy for Sure book, the #1 financial strategy for business owners that want to multiply wealth predictably, just go to getwealthyforsure.com. There's a free paperback book that we will ship. You only pay for shipping and handling. So you can request the book there, and there's a ton of videos there too. And for Cashflow Ninja, just go to cashflowninja.com. We've got all our books there for free. Over 1,000 podcasts recorded for over 9 years now. So there's a lot of information for folks there.
Awesome. Well, this was an awesome opportunity for me. I really appreciate it. And yeah, you've given me a lot to think about.
Awesome. Thank you.